Collectible card games are great, and over the last few years, I've had a chance to play quite a few of them. This is in no small part thanks to the rising prominence of free-to-play digital card games. In some ways, this business model has done a lot for the popularity of collectible card games, mainly by removing their biggest barriers to entry, time and money. When it comes to convenience, online matchmaking is way easier than setting up an in-person game, and while free-to-play card games can still cost players a lot of money in the long term, they have the advantage of delaying that first payment until after the player has had a chance to experience the game for themselves. The result of this is that players who want to try out a bunch of different card games can do so more easily than ever before. But after spending so much time playing online multiplayer-focused card games, the inherent flaws of this genre become hard to ignore. If you've spent some time with games like these, you probably know the tedium of losing to the same meta deck over and over again. You've almost certainly felt the effects of a business model that blatantly favors those players with the most money to spend. And given how grindy these progression systems tend to be, you might have noticed that these games can, at times, feel more like a daily chore than a good use of your free time. So recently, I've been thinking a lot about a type of game that I think is long overdue for a resurgence: the single-player collectible card game. And I can't think of a better way to show you why than by looking at one of my all-time favorites, Mega Man Battle Network. For those who aren't familiar, the Battle Network series is a spin-off of the Mega Man franchise, a card game RPG hybrid and, in my view, one of the better examples of how to design a great single-player CCG. Now, I could dedicate an entire video to discussing Battle Network's unique blend of card battling with real-time combat, but today I'm more interested in taking a step back and looking at what this game gets right outside of its particular battle system, because I think there's a lot we can learn from how it leverages the unique advantages of a more focused single-player experience. Like most digital card games, Battle Network starts you off with a simple beginner deck filled with relatively weak cards. But rather than only rewarding you with randomized booster packs, Battle Network showcases a wide variety of ways to expand your collection. You can find new cards almost anywhere, in shops, as rewards for beating enemies and bosses, in hidden spots scattered throughout the overworld, and even as rewards for solving puzzles or completing quests. Because the ways in which you find new cards are more varied, the simple act of collecting them is made that much more enjoyable. You feel rewarded when you take the time to explore a new area or finally beat a tough boss. The game's combat ranking system also rewards combos, counters, and quick victories with better drops from enemies, encouraging fast-paced and stylish gameplay. And cards won from battle let you mimic the abilities of the enemies who drop them, meaning that finding a new area with new enemies presents not only new challenges to overcome, but also new strategies to incorporate into your own deck. Having a big selection of tools for distributing cards gives the developers a lot of control when it comes to teaching the player and controlling the game's pace. For example, you might notice that your starter deck mostly consists of simple cards that deal direct damage, but as you progress, the game starts to incorporate more interesting mechanics like program advances, environmental hazards, and elemental weaknesses. By gaining access to these cards behind events in the storyline, the game can gradually ramp up its complexity and difficulty without overwhelming the player at the start. But that doesn't mean the game has to be stingy with cards. In my experience with Battle Network, I almost always had access to enough new cards to keep things interesting, and I found myself constantly tweaking my decks and strategies as my collection grew. Battle Network further explores the possibilities of single-player card games by making most battles asymmetrical. When designing game mechanics for competitive multiplayer, designers have to be careful that no single strategy is drastically stronger than the others, and it's generally in their best interest to design cards and deck archetypes that are not just fun to play, but fun to play against. This means that multiplayer card games have certain limitations on their design space that games like Battle Network are free to experiment with. I mentioned earlier that cards dropped from enemies let you mimic their abilities, but they tend to be balanced in the player's favor. Attacks used by enemies will give players enough time to react, while in the player's hands, those same cards will be fast enough to feel responsive and facilitate combos that wouldn't be possible otherwise. Furthermore, bosses in Battle Network will often have large health pools and dangerous but predictable attack patterns. Again, these are fun to play against because the player can pick up on these patterns and learn to dodge them while putting their most damaging cards to good use, allowing for unique combat encounters that just wouldn't be fair or possible in a multiplayer setting. Lastly, I think one of Battle Network's biggest strengths as a single-player experience is the context that surrounds the gameplay. Almost every collectible card game takes place in some fictional setting, with the cards serving as abstract representations of the creatures, characters, and events that exist there. As a result, card battles can play out like little self-contained stories, with rising tension, unexpected twists, and dramatic conclusions. But games like Battle Network are able to go one step further by placing all of these individual conflicts in the context of an ongoing story. When you earn a new card by defeating a rival in battle, then later use that card to summon him to help you beat an even stronger enemy, that doesn't just feel like using a cool new card. It feels like dramatic setup and payoff. In the world of Battle Network, a card battle is not an abstraction. It's literally how people resolve conflicts. And as silly as that sounds, it's a contrivance that ironically makes it easier to feel invested in the game as a whole, because the characters in the story have the same goal as the player, to collect cards. I still really enjoy collectible card games, and I'm glad that the genre seems to be doing well today. But I think it's a shame that we don't really have a modern successor to Mega Man Battle Network. That's not to say that we haven't come close. For solo card game players, we have some fantastic deck-building roguelikes such as Slay the Spire, while fans of Battle Network's combat system can look to spiritual successors like One Step from Eden. But I still can't help but feel like this particular subgenre has a lot of untapped potential. But in the meantime, check out the original series if you haven't yet, because I think these games still have a lot to offer. Thanks for watching.